On June 30th, 2017, General Secretary Xi Jinping attended a grand gala at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Centre to mark the 20th anniversary of the Special Administrative Region's return to China. As the grand event proceeded, a sequence of episodes from the territory's history was shown on the auditorium's big screen.
"此时此刻，站在经过岁月洗礼、发生沧桑巨变的湘江之滨，我们抚今追昔，感慨万千。香港的命运从来同祖国紧密相连。
The return of Hong Kong is a splendid chapter on the road to the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. Shenzhen River is the boundary between Shenzhen and Hong Kong. After losing the Opium Wars, the humiliated Qing government was forced to cede territories and pay compensation to the UK. It was then that Hong Kong became separated from its motherland, with merely a river in between. The reunification of China had always been the unswerving goal of the Communist Party of China and the whole Chinese people. On the issues of the foreign colonies of Hong Kong and Macau, the CPC Central Committee adopted a plan for the long-term and use-fully policy for the best interests of China. While abiding by the status quo, the Chinese mainland never ignored Hong Kong and the needs of its people. In 1963, Hong Kong suffered from an acute water shortage. Reserves dropped to a level where they would be completely used up in 40 days. The CPC Central Committee immediately decided to divert water from Guangdong's Dongjiang River to save its fellow countrymen in Hong Kong.
都高兴啊，好像得了宝一样。那个心经里头，全靠我们中国人民。 香港人得救，否则的话，饿不死要干死。
About 90% of Hong Kong's fresh food, 80% of its fresh water, and 25% of its electricity and natural gas are supplied by the Chinese mainland. Without critical and long-term support from the mainland, Hong Kong would not be as prosperous as it is today. In 1974, when Mao Zedong was discussing the Hong Kong issue with visiting British Prime Minister Edward Heath, he pointed to Deng Xiaoping and other top CPC leaders and said it was going to be the next administration's job to solve the Hong Kong problem. Taking over the mission of reunifying China, Deng Xiaoping put forward his original concept of one country, two systems, based on China's reality, providing excellent guidance and new possibilities for the country's peaceful reunification. On September 22, 1982, Margaret Thatcher visited China to negotiate the future of Hong Kong. The British Prime Minister initially pushed for continued British rule over its colony after 1997.
主权问题是不能够谈判的，就是说中国呀，1997年收回的问题啊是不能谈判，不管有什么方式。
As a reply to Margaret Thatcher's argument that continuing British administration of Hong Kong was necessary for the stability and prosperity of the territory, Deng Xiaoping said,
要不排除啊，这个时候发生意外的事件，香港啊发生动乱，一国我们根本谈不拢，中国将考虑接受香港的时间和方式。
After rounds of negotiation, it was accepted that China would regain sovereignty over Hong Kong. A solution on how it would do so was determined in line with the wishes of the Chinese people. After 2 years and a total of 22 rounds of hard negotiations, the Chinese and British governments formally signed the Sino-British Joint Declaration on the question of Hong Kong on December 19, 1984. Stating that China would resume sovereignty over Hong Kong on July 1, 1997. And according to Article 31 of the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong would exist as a special administrative region directly under the Central People's Government, but enjoying a high degree of autonomy. In April 1990, the third session of the 7th National People's Congress deliberated and adopted the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China, laying the legal foundation for the administration of the SAR. But after the Soviet Union fell apart and communist rule ended in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s and early 1990s, the British government misjudged the situation. It began setting up a series of obstacles to the handover of Hong Kong in violation of the Joint Declaration.
江泽民同志领导中央工作，一直到香港回归了。这个阶段应该说我们这个香港工作是最困难的一个时期，跟英国人斗争啊，也是最尖锐的。
Faced with the obstacles laid by the UK, the third generation of CPC central leadership, with Jiang Zemin at its core, braced themselves for the historical responsibility of realizing Hong Kong's smooth return to the motherland. Jiang Zemin clearly stated that the Chinese nation would never yield to external pressure. In October 1989, the British administration in Hong Kong unilaterally announced the construction of a new airport without any prior consultations with China. With a budget of over 200 billion Hong Kong dollars, the project was to span beyond 1997, which meant heavy debts would fall on the future SAR government. China argued vigorously so that the well-being and interests of the people of Hong Kong after the handover would be guaranteed. Another problem then arose. In 1992, the newly appointed governor of Hong Kong, Chris Patten, announced a plan to change Hong Kong's hitherto executive-dominated political system, increasing the difficulty of governing the territory after its return to China.
And because of the example of decency and success that it offers.
他这样做的目的是什么呢？表面上来讲，他要加速什么香港的民主进程。那香港的过去有什么民主啊？100多年呢，香港的这个立法局都是委任的，他推翻了，变成 完全变相的直选。目的在于什么呢？目的在于在97年之后啊，通过立法局继续操纵香港的政局啊，这个提供便利。
Patton's reform proposals were against the Joint Declaration and the principle of the Basic Law. They violated the previous agreement and understanding between China and the UK, and were therefore strongly opposed by China. With the British acting unilaterally, Sino-British negotiations on Hong Kong's future political system eventually broke down. The CPC Central Committee decided to draw up its own contingency plan.
我们不能把香港实现平稳过渡的希望寄托在英方的合作上，而应立足于依靠我们自己的力量和港人的共同参与。
On July 16, 1993, the Preliminary Working Commission of the Preparatory Committee of the Hong Kong SAR was formed in Beijing. On January 26, 1996, the Preparatory Committee for the Hong Kong SAR was formally established in Beijing's Great Hall of the People. In accordance with the principle of Hong Kong people governing Hong Kong, 94 members of the Preparatory Committee were Hong Kong people, accounting for 63% of the organization. In November 1996, the Election Committee for the first government of the HK-SAR was formed. On December 11, 1996, the Election Committee elected Tung Chee-hwa as the first chief executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region.
本来我就选他，本来就对，那个很合适这个机位的，很合适。
Jiang Zemin met with Tung Chee-hwa in Zhongnanhai, Beijing. He was delighted to sit down with the man who would be Hong Kong's first Chinese administrator in more than 100 years. Tung was the symbol of a new era in which the people of the city would finally be governing themselves. At about 5 p.m. on June 30th, 1997, the plane of the Chinese government delegation landed at Hong Kong's Kai Tak Airport. Jiang Zemin alighted. It was the first time a top Chinese leader had set foot in the territory in the 156 years since it was ceded to the UK. On the same day, the Hong Kong garrison of the People's Liberation Army officially entered Hong Kong on the order of Jiang Zemin.
我代表中国人民解放军驻香港部队接管执行，你们可以下岗，我们上岗，祝你们一路平安。
Rain fell on this day as if it were washing away China's century of humiliation. Hong Kong, the territory that was lost for 156 years, was home again.
開心啊！開心，回歸啊！我哋中國人啊嘛。
唱迎接回歸，这是我心情太高，太激动了。不管冒雨，就是下铁我也会唱。
As the clock struck to mark the first minute of July the 1st, the Chinese anthem played and China's national flag was raised, alongside the regional flag of the Hong Kong SAR.
此时此刻，世界各国人民都把目光投向香港。中华人民共和国香港特别行政区正式成立，这是中华民族的盛世，也是世界和平与正义事业的胜利。中国万岁！中国万岁！中国万岁！中国万岁！
After over 100 years of foreign rule, Hong Kong had returned to where it belongs. It was an important step towards the complete reunification of China and a great achievement in Chinese history. Hong Kong residents have since become the true masters of their own home city.
我深信不疑，香港的将来会更加美好。
From the moment of its return, Hong Kong started to implement the One Country, Two Systems agreement, granting it a high degree of autonomy. The destiny of Hong Kong has since been more closely connected with that of the motherland. From the financial crisis that swept across Asia in 1998 to the global financial crisis of 2008, whenever Hong Kong has been in need, the central government of China has been prompt to give help. One after another, a raft of policies have been introduced to help Hong Kong overcome adversity and remain a stable and prosperous society. While Hong Kong was returning home, another child of China was getting ready to do the same. Macau was gradually occupied by Portugal from the mid-16th century. In June 1986, the Chinese and Portuguese governments began negotiations on the territory's future. On April 13, 1987, the joint statement on the question of Macau was formally signed, returning sovereignty over Macau to China on December 20, 1999.
"降旗升旗仪式现在开始。"
风清波平如镜，中葡两国政府在这里举行庄严的澳门政权交接仪式，宣告中国政府对澳门恢复行使主权。历史将永远记住这一举世关注的重要时刻。
The successful return of Macau was another milestone on the road to Chinese reunification. On the day of its return, not many had expected that Macau, which had had negative economic growth for 4 consecutive years and a serious problem with public security, would soon become one of the fastest growing economies in the world. While celebrating the return of Macau, it was hard for the Chinese communists to not think of the last separated piece of the motherland across the Taiwan Straits.
此时此刻，我想起了唐代诗人王维的著名诗句：“遥知兄弟登高处，片刹茱萸少一人。”在祖国内地人民与香港同胞、澳门同胞同庆澳门回归这一名作盛世之时，我相信台湾同胞也同我们有着一样的欢乐的心情。
Since the Kuomintang's retreat to Taiwan in 1949, tensions between the mainland and the island province have persisted. In the early 1980s, Deng Xiaoping's concept of one country, two systems created possibilities for the development of cross-straits relations. In 1987, in response to internal pressure, the Taiwan authorities lifted a ban on residents of the island province visiting relatives in the mainland. After 38 years of separation, family members were finally reunited. In 1990, the Taiwan authorities approved the establishment of the Straits Exchange Foundation. At the end of 1991, the mainland government established the Association for Relations Across the Taiwan Straits. In March 1992, the two Cross-straits organizations entered negotiations and reached the 1992 consensus. This stated that both sides would uphold the One China principle and work together to seek national reunification.
所以今天我们可以说，就92共识的内容就是两端经过协商相互认可的文字，不是再去表述其他的。
On April 27, 1993, a landmark meeting between Wang Daohan, president of the Association of Relations Across the Taiwan Straits, and Ku Chunfu, president of the Straits Exchange Foundation, was held in Singapore.
坐下来谈，我们两岸之间的许多问题都是可以逐步解决的。我们都有个共同的目标，能走向统一。
On October 14, 1998, Ku Chunfu led the Straits Exchange Foundation delegation to visit the mainland. Then Wang Daohan and Ku Chunfu met again at the Peace Hotel in Shanghai. The meeting had been delayed 3 years because of interference from separatists in Taiwan.
对中国的指标是，我认为还是要回到这里，才能够跳脱现在的僵局。
Though separated by mountains and rivers, we enjoy the same winds and rains. Taiwan is an inalienable part of China, and reunification is unstoppable. On January 30, 1995, Jiang Zemin delivered a speech entitled, "Continue to promote the reunification of the motherland." He put forward 8 points for developing cross-straits relations and advancing the peaceful reunification of China. On March 4, 2005, the next president of China, Hu Jintao, put forth a 4-point guideline on cross-straits relations under new circumstances. At the subsequent third session of the 10th National People's Congress, the anti-secession law was overwhelmingly adopted. On April 28, 2005, Hu Jintao and the then KMT chairman Lian Chan met in Beijing. It was the first meeting between top leaders of the Communist Party of China and the Kuomintang in 60 years. On November 7, 2015, Xi Jinping and Ma Ying-jeou met in Singapore. It was the first time the paramount leaders of both sides had met since 1949, marking the beginning of direct dialogue and communication between the two sides. On the 40th anniversary of the issuing of Message to Compatriots in Taiwan, Xi Jinping systematically expounded a policy for advancing the process of the peaceful reunification of China in the new era, as well as a vision for realizing the Chinese dream through the efforts of the whole Chinese nation.
历史不能选择，现在可以把握，未来可以开创。新时代是中华民族大发展、大作为的时代，也是两岸同胞大发展、大作为的时代。前进道路上不可能一帆风顺，但只要我们和衷共济、共同奋斗，就一定能够共创中华民族伟大复兴美好未来，就一定能够完成祖国统一大业。
从长夜到日出，走过千山万水的路，每一步都是信仰足迹，烙印下新中国版图。从贫弱到富强，走出复兴，为业征途，每一天都有奋斗牺牲，只为人民拥抱幸福，凭着心中坚定信念，敢叫日月换新天，雄关漫道，风雨无阻，汇聚起中华儿女同向前。从贫弱到富强，走出复兴，为业征途，每一天都有奋斗牺牲。